Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Swedish heavyweight Otto Wallin says he will prove he is the real deal when he faces Travis Kauffman, and that's on the David Benavidez and Roma Angulo card this weekend. So Wallin, he's been out of the ring since his fight with Tyson Fury, where he had a degree of success, and for some it was an unexpected amount of success, but ultimately he lost that fight. And since then, his promoter Dmitry Salita has been looking for opportunities for Wallin, but the sort of money fights and the big opportunities have not been there. So hence now this fight with Travis Kauffman, and Kauffman himself also coming off a layoff, having not fought since late 2018 and a loss to Luis Ortiz. So in Kauffman, he faces a guy 6'3". He's a bit of a hard man, a record of 32-3, somewhat limited, but he is a guy that can go rounds. He is durable, and he could make it awkward at times for Otto Wallin if he does sort of switch off. But Wallin is expected to win this one, and we'll go through a few quotes. So this is on the undercard. It's not the co-main event, but featuring prominently on the card. So Otto Wallin, and this is from the media release, and we'll get to a few thoughts on this after I go through his and then Kauffman's statements. But he says, "It's not so much about proving that the Fury fight wasn't a fluke. It's about me going out there and being myself and taking care of Kauffman. He is a good fighter, so I have to be alert at all times, but I feel like I'm just a better fighter so long as I go out there and perform. No one will be saying it's a fluke and that I am for real. Hopefully I will get a title shot soon. I did better against Fury than anybody else has." We're going to come back to that because I don't think that's really that accurate. But he continues, "So you can take that and see that I'm one of the top guys. I think that I'm one of the top guys, and I'm happy to be fighting again so I can show that. The champions are tied up with themselves, so we'll see what happens. But I feel like after the Fury fight, people know that I'm in the mix. Fury seems to be always calling people out, but he never mentions my name." Well, actually, I'll jump in there because, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Been there, done that, got the postcard, but we'll come back to that. We'll circle back a little bit later on. So he says, "I would like to fight the champions, of course, and that is Fury and Anthony Joshua. Wilder is a top guy, so that's an option when he comes back. But a Fury rematch or a fight with Joshua is what I really want. It's important for me to take care of Kauffman and stay busy and then get back in the ring. It feels great that I'm finally going to fight. It's been almost a year since my last fight." Travis Kauffman, he says, "I turn 35 next Friday, so it'd be a great birthday present to beat this guy up before that. Every time I go to fight, I don't get the nerves that people talk about. It's another day at the office. This is the way to provide for my family. There's always a lot on the line. If I win, it puts me in position to make life-changing money. I have everything on the line because I know I have what it takes to beat Wallin. His claim to fame is losing to Tyson Fury. That's all they know him for. I won't take anything away from him, but he's trying to prove that it wasn't a fluke. It's my job to stop him, and I believe I have what it takes to do that. I've seen some flaws from Wallin, and I've seen him do some great things. He's got youth on his side, but I have the experience. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I've been in there with some of the best heavyweights in the world. I don't underestimate anybody in the ring. I'm coming to bang, and may the best man win. I believe I'm the better man." There is a little bit more, but we won't go through that. But in respect of Travis Kauffman's statements, so he is saying that all Otto Wallin is known for is losing to Tyson Fury. And to a large extent, that is correct. Heading into that fight, not a lot of, especially casual boxing fans, had ever really heard of Otto Wallin. Ahead of that fight, I said that I thought Wallin would come better than advertised. Just because people didn't know him didn't mean he didn't have talent. And that's ultimately what happened. He put on a much better performance than a lot of people expected, and it was a better performance than Tom Schwarz, who Fury had fought just a few months before. But he did still lose that fight. And there seems to be a degree of maybe revisionism about, how much success Otto Wallin had in that fight, because ultimately early on, he had some good rounds. He cut Fury open. But Fury did end up going to control that fight for the most part, through the mid to later rounds, and ultimately won a relatively comfortable decision. And sure, you can argue potentially that the doctor could have potentially stepped in, but it didn't happen. So the loss is what it is. And I do believe that there has been, some of the performance has been blown out of all proportion, because ultimately it was a good effort, but it was a losing effort. And Showtime has actually come out with a graphic which has been reposted by Dimitri Salita of Salita Promotions, basically saying that Otto Wallin is a top 10 heavyweight, even if the resume doesn't actually back that up. And this is one of the things I've been saying, to truly prove he is an elite guy, a top 10 heavyweight, he's got to actually do it in the ring. And this is the problem for Otto Wallin. He hasn't been in the ring in the past year. And some of that has seemingly been they've been looking for opportunities, but perhaps looking for a bit too much to take the opportunity. That's an outside looking in perspective. Ultimately, they've sort of squandered some of that momentum that he'd built up from that fight, because he could have stepped into some other fights potentially if they'd have taken a little less money. But it is prize fighting after all. It's hard for, outsiders like myself to say take less than you think you're worth. But ultimately, didn't get a fight, hasn't capitalized on the momentum, and now he's taking a fight with Travis Kauffman. And this fight is expected to be a win for Otto Wallin, a sort of high-level tune-up. He should actually box Kauffman relatively conclusively, and I'm predicting that this one goes to the cards. He gets a wide decision. It's a 10-rounder, maybe something like 8 rounds to 2. Kauffman may have little spots of success, but I think on the back of the movement, the jab, Otto Wallin is going to sort of waltz to a decision here. And I have had some questions recently. Do I think that Wallin is going to stop Travis Kauffman? I'm not expecting it, but that is within the realms of possibility, maybe some sort of late stoppage, but I'd be more expecting that this is sort of a wide points decision on the cards. Kauffman has proven that he's a tough, durable guy. But getting to Otto Wallin and his statements, saying that no one will be saying it is a fluke, and he's talking of the Fury performance, and that he is for real. This isn't really the fight to prove it, because Travis Kauffman is a guy, somewhere around top 50 level, somewhere there or thereabouts. It's hard to sort of, beat a guy like this and then automatically claim you're within the top 10. Because against a guy like this, you could look good. If he does manage to sort of evade Travis Kauffman and his power shots and boxes conclusively, because Wallin is a bit of a finesse fighter. He's not going to go in there and try to bang it out with Travis Kauffman. I'd be shocked if he did. I don't think he's got that sort of power. But the statement where he sort of says that he has fought Fury better than anybody else has and did better against him, I mean, that is, if you were to sort of take the last couple of fights, yeah, but if you go back through Tyson Fury's career, especially early on, Fury was a bit of a different fighter, and he did get into some unnecessary wars, and he fought a different way, and he did get dropped, and he has been in a couple of controversial fights early on in his career. And you can, go back and do the research for yourself if you don't believe me. There is fights against guys like John McDermott, for example. But then you can also argue later in his career that, obviously Steve Cunningham, he got dropped by him. And Deontay Wilder obviously dropped Tyson Fury a couple of times in their first fight. So Otto Wallin opened up a couple of cuts early on, but couldn't capitalize, couldn't take him out. And ultimately Tyson Fury controlled that fight to a large extent, and the scorecards reflected that. So to me, I kind of think they've milked it for a little bit more than it's worth. But, he does have an opportunity to prove that he is a good fighter. And I think that's not in question. He is a good fighter. I would have him in the top 30 at this point, but some of that is based on the fact that he hasn't proved he can go any higher. He hasn't got the names on the resume. And for all the talk of, I looked good in a losing effort, I don't think we can just sort of declare him to be in the top 10. And I haven't really seen too many other people doing that. Obviously, his promoter, Dimitri Salita, has been declaring him an elite heavyweight, but he's a promoter after all. And the broadcast, that graphic, and here it is again on screen, they're saying he's a top 10 because it's a promotional tool. They've got him on the card. They want to sort of promote the card more broadly and make out that, these are some of the best guys in the world. Look, this guy is going to be on our card. Please watch it. So, yeah, Otto Wallin has got more to prove, but the Kauffman fight only tells us so much. But I'm looking forward to seeing him back in the ring, but it has been a wasted opportunity this past year since what was a credible effort against Fury. But on the back of that, I didn't necessarily think that Otto Wallin was a world beater and, a top 5 guy all day, every day, like others have suggested. But he is certainly a very solid heavyweight who's got good movement, good skills, and he should be able to control Travis Kauffman and get the W in this fight. But what do you make of it? Travis Kauffman, Otto Wallin, Showtime? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.